Hey everyone, let's jump straight into this explainer today, completely skipping the generic intros because honestly, we're starting right where most students literally bleed marks. If you're studying for the Cambridge AS and A-Level Information Technology 9626 exams, you already know that just memorizing the material, that's only half the battle. The other half is knowing exactly how the examiner wants you to write it down. So today, we're taking your raw knowledge and turning it into a bulletproof, high-mark strategy.
Section 1. The cold open mistake.
Let me show you the exact mistake 9 out of 10 students make. Listen to this answer. Real time is good because it's fast. Disadvantages are it costs a lot. Now that might sound totally reasonable to a beginner, right? It feels like common sense. But in the 9626 exam, it immediately gets slapped with a low band score. Why? Because it completely lacks specific terminology and evidence. It's a textbook example of what the examiner's red pen is actively searching for. This happens when you jump in with vague, everyday language instead of precise, technical anchoring.
Contrast that vague wording trap with what we call the mark magnet approach. On the flawed side, you've got generic advice that's totally detached from the scenario, often confusing concepts like validation versus verification. But the mark magnet, it uses precise syllabus terms, it explains the exact sequence of operations, and most importantly, it anchors every single technique directly to the specific case study given in the question. That's how you win.
Section 2. The Peel-J Framework.
To fix that generic answer trap once and for all, we rely on the Peel-J framework. That stands for point, evidence, explanation, link, and judgment. Instead of just blurting out a fact, you state your point using precise terminology. Then, you back it up with evidence straight from the case study. You follow that with an explanation of how the process actually works, and then you link those consequences right back to the user or organization. Finally, you drop a judgment, evaluating exactly why it's better or worse than an alternative. This forces you to anchor your technical knowledge to the specific exam scenario every single time. Think of it as a loop. Deconstruct, solve, evaluate, and recommend. This is the exact procedural framework you need to lock in those critical method marks. First, you deconstruct the question. Second, solve it systematically in clear, logical steps. Third, evaluate your answer to see if it actually makes sense in the real world. And fourth, make justified recommendations. Seriously, even if your final calculation is a tiny bit off, showing this structured working is your ultimate safety net for method marks.
Section 3. Database queries and searches. Let's do a technical deep dive and apply this precision. Imagine you're sitting in the exam hall and you're staring at this exact meals database. You've got fields for venue, town, county, meal cost, and guests. The exam asks you to extract very specific subsets of data based on the town field using access queries.
Let's make this an interactive challenge for a second. Can you spot the difference between how these three wildcard syntaxes are going to filter the data? We've got asterisk Ford, Ford asterisk, and asterisk Ford asterisk. Take just a second to think about how that one little star changes the entire logic of the query. Okay, so precision here is everything. For option A, asterisk Ford, the system is looking for anything ending in Ford. So the correct output is Ashford, Bradford, and Brentford. A ton of students miss Brentford here because they rush and forget to double-check their logic against the raw data table. For option B, Ford asterisk finds towns starting with Ford, so just Fordham. And option C, asterisk Ford asterisk, finds the word Ford anywhere in the text, pulling in all 5 of those towns. If you miss just one of these outputs because you rush the read, you're dropping a super easy mark.
When you're inside the actual database UI using the simple query wizard, you've got to be meticulous. If you need, say, red or blue products, you have to use that or Boolean statement right there in the criteria row. A really common trap students fall into is leaving the results of a previous query as their source data for a totally new, independent question, instead of just selecting the original table again. Don't let that happen to you.
Section 4. Calculations and common errors.
Let's tackle a high-stakes scenario where literally a single misplaced character can cost you your grade: runtime calculations. Check out this syntax comparison. If you're asked to create a field calculated at runtime called profit that subtracts cost from sales, you absolutely must use a colon to define the new field name. The correct syntax is profit, colon, bracket, sales, bracket, minus, bracket, cost, bracket. If you write profit equals sales minus cost, you've completely messed up the syntax.
Using an equal sign instead of a colon forces Access to add its own generic field name, usually expr1, which completely breaks the required formatting and, you guessed it, loses you the mark.
It's the exact same story when dealing with built-in summary data functions in Access, things like sum, average, minimum, maximum, and count. Remember, selecting summary data doesn't show each individual data item when the query is run. It calculates across the selected numeric fields. And just like those runtime calculations, you have to execute these with flawless syntax. Always check your syntax, run the query, and then do a quick reality check to see if the numerical answers actually make real-world sense.
Section 5. The syllabus-wide high-mark strategy. The true beauty of the PLJ framework is that this adaptability test applies across the entire IT 9626 syllabus, not just databases. Notice how this operating system's blueprint demands that you anchor every explanation back to a specific context. The examiner's red flags here include vague wording and confusing similar terms, like monitoring versus control. To get that top band score, you can't just explain what an OS does in theory. You have to explain how it functions in the specific scenario provided, whether that's a transport system, secure communications, or media production.
And we see the exact same generic trap with flowcharts and file handling. Failing to describe the full sequence of operations, or just naming a technique without actually explaining its mechanism, results in incomplete marks. You really have to detail the how and the why behind the IT process, making sure absolutely no steps in the sequence are skipped.
Now look at this satellite systems breakdown. The examiner's red pen warning zone is actively hunting for students who provide basic definitions without any case study context. Candidates constantly confuse terminology here, like mixing up GPS with surveillance systems. Remember, a lower band answer is purely descriptive. A top band answer is evaluative. It identifies the limitations of the satellite technology specifically within the given scenario, and then provides a justified judgment.
Finally, for expert systems, identifying the exact command words is your ultimate mark magnet. Whether the prompt asks you to state, describe, or evaluate, you have to adapt your answer. Tying technical components like the knowledge base, rules base, and inference engine directly to the scenario is exactly how you pull marks straight from the mark scheme.
Section 6. The final checkpoint.
Let's bring all of this together into a disciplined, 3-pass revision cycle that you can take straight into the exam hall. Pass 1, you fix your definitions and master those core contrasts, like knowing exactly why validation is not verification. Pass 2, you rehearse worked explanations and sequential procedures, just like the database syntax we covered earlier. And Pass 3, the ultimate test, you practice applying that theory to completely new scenarios. If you follow this cycle, you stop just memorizing fact and start actively evaluating IT systems like a top-band candidate.
So keep this framework in mind and never let a generic cold open answer cost you a grade again. Before you write a single word in your next paper, I want you to ask yourself, have I anchored every technical point to the specific scenario provided? Are your current study notes actually preparing you to evaluate a system or just define it? Think about it and let me know in the comments which Cambridge IT topic we should decode next.